In this video, you're going to learn a few more advanced features that Handlebars has to offer. This is going to make it easier to render your markup, especially markup that's used in multiple places, and it's going to make it easier to inject dynamic data into your web pages. In order to illustrate the first thing we're going to talk about, I want to open up both about.hbs and home.hbs. And you'll notice down at the bottom, they both have the exact same footer code. We have a little copyright message for both, and they both have the same header area, which is the H1 tag. In the future, they might have links that link to other pages, a logo, or anything like that, but for now it's just an H1. Now, this really isn't a problem because we have two pages, but as you add more and more pages, it's going to become a real pain to update your header and your footer. You're going to have to go into every file and manage the code there. What we're going to talk about instead is something called a partial. A partial is a partial piece of your website. It's something you can reuse throughout your templates. For example, we might have a footer partial that renders the footer code. You can include that partial on any page you need a footer. You can do the same thing for header. In order to get started, the first thing we need to do is set up our server.js file just a little bit to let Handlebars know that we want to add support for partials. In order to do this, we're going to add one line of code right here above where we declare our view engine, and it's going to look something like this. hbs.register partials. Now, register partials with a capital P in partials, that is going to take the directory you want to use for all of your Handlebar partial files, and we're going to be specifying that directory as the first and only argument. Once again, this does need to be the absolute directory, so I'm going to use the __dir name variable right here. Then we can concatenate the rest of the path, which is going to be /views. And in this case, I want you to use /partials. We're going to store our partial files right inside of a directory in the views folder. Now we can go ahead and create that folder right in views called partials. Inside of here, we can put any of the Handlebars partials we like. To illustrate how they work, we're going to go ahead and create one called footer.hbs. Footer.hbs. And inside of here, we'll have access to the same Handlebars features, which means we can write some markup, we can inject variables, we can do whatever we like. For now, what we're going to do is copy the footer tag exactly, pasting it inside of footer.hbs. Now we have our footer.hbs file. This is the partial, and we can include it in both about and home. Let's go ahead and do that. In order to do that, we're going to delete the code that we already have in the partial, and we're going to replace it with opening and closing two curly braces. Now, instead of injecting data, we want to inject a template, and the syntax for that is to add a greater than symbol with a space followed by the partial name. In our case, that partial is called footer, so we can add this right here. And then I can go ahead and save about and do the same thing over in home.hbs. Over in home.hbs, I'm going to delete the footer and replace it with the syntax to inject the footer partial. And there we go. We now have our footer partial. It's rendering on both pages. To illustrate how this works, I'm going to fire up my server. And by default, NodeMon, it's not going to watch your Handlebars files. So if you make a change, the website's not going to render as you might expect. We can fix this by running NodeMon, passing in server.js, and providing the E flag. This lets us specify all of the extensions we want to watch. In our case, we're going to watch the JS extension for the server file, and after the comma, the HBS extension. Perfect. Now our app is up and running. We can go ahead and refresh things over in the browser, and they should look the same. We have our about page with our footer, and we have our home page with the exact same footer. The advantage now is if we want to change that footer, we just do it in one place. Over in footer.hbs, I can add something to our footer paragraph tag. I'm going to add a little message created by Andrew Mead with a hyphen. Save the file, and now when I refresh the browser, right here we have our brand new footer. It's going to show up for both the home page and the about page. There's no need to do anything manual in either of these pages, and this is the real power of partials. You have some code, you want to reuse it inside of your website, so you simply create a partial and you inject it wherever you like. And now that we have the footer partial in place, it's going to be your challenge to create the header partial. That means you're going to need to create a brand new file, header.hbs. You're going to want to add the h1 tag inside of that file, and then you're going to render the partial in both about.hbs and home.hbs. Both pages should still look the same. Now, in order to test that it actually worked, go ahead and add a special character right after the h1, like J or 123, just to make sure that what you typed in the partial is actually what's rendering, and it's not left over from the pages we have here. We'll go ahead and clean that up after the challenge. So take a moment, create that brand new header file, add it inside of both about and home, test it, and when you're done, go ahead and click play. How'd you do? Hopefully you were able to create that header and you were able to render it inside of our website pages. I'm going to get started by creating a new file in the partials folder called header.hbs. Inside of header.hbs, we're going to take the h1 tag from our website, paste it right inside, and save it. Now we can go ahead and use this header partial in both files. Inside of about, you needed to do this using the syntax, the double curly braces with the greater than sign, followed by the partial name, header, and we're going to do the exact same thing for the home page. In the home page, I'll delete our h1 tag, inject the header, and save the file. Now I do want to create something slightly different just so I can test that it actually is using the partial. I'm going to type 123 right after the h1 tag. Now that all my files are saved, I should be able to refresh the browser. And right here I see about page with 123 printing, which is fantastic. This means the header partial is indeed working. And if I go back to the home page, everything still looks great. Now that we have the header broken out into its own file, we can do all sorts of things. We can take our h1 tag and put it inside of a header tag, which is the appropriate way to declare your header inside of HTML. Right here, we add an opening and closing header tag. We can take the h1 and we can move it right inside. We can also go ahead and add some links to the other pages on our website. Now this isn't going to look nice because I'm not going to go into any styling at the moment, but we could add an anchor tag right here for the home page by adding an A tag. Inside of the A tag, we'll specify the link text we'd like to show up. I'm going to go with home. Then inside of the href attribute, we can specify the path the link should take you to, which would just be /. Then we can take the same paragraph tag, copy it, and paste it down below and make a link for the about page. I'll change the page text to about, the link text, and the URL, instead of going to / is going to go to / about. Now we've made a change to our header file and it's going to be available on all of the pages of our website. I'm on the home page. If I refresh it, I get home and about. I can click about to go to the about page, and then I can click home to come right back. All of this is much easier to manage now that we have partials inside of our website. Now, before we go, there is one more thing I want to talk about. This is a handlebars helper. Handlebars helpers are going to be ways for you to register functions to run to dynamically create some output. For example, inside of server.js, we currently inject the current year inside of both of our templates, and that's not really necessary. There is a better way to pass this data in. This data shouldn't need to be provided because we're always going to be using the exact same function. We're always going to take the new date, get full year return value, passing it in. Instead, we're going to use a partial, and we'll set ours up right now. Now, a partial is nothing more than a function you can run from inside of your handlebars templates. All we need to do is register it, and I'm going to do that up above, right below where we set up our Express middleware. Right here, we're going to call hbs.register, and we're going to be registering a helper, so we're going to call register helper. Now, register helper takes two arguments. It takes the name of the helper as the first argument and the function to run as the second. The first argument right here is going to be get current year in our case. We're going to create a helper that returns that current year. The second argument is going to be our function. I'm going to use an arrow function. And anything we return from this function is going to get rendered in place of the get current year call. That means if I call get current year inside of the footer, it's going to return the year from the function, and that data is what's going to get rendered. Over in server.js, we can return the year by using return and having the exact same code we have down below. We'll make a new date, and we're going to call its get full year method. Now that we have a helper, we can remove this data from every single one of our rendering calls, which is going to be really fantastic because there really is no need to compute it for every page since it's always the same. Now that we've removed that data from the individual calls to render, we are going to have to use getCurrentYear inside of the footer. Instead of referencing current year, we are going to use the helper getCurrentYear. And there's no need for any special syntax. When you use something inside of curly braces that clearly isn't a partial, Handlebars is first going to look for a helper with that name. If there is no helper, it'll look for a piece of data with that getCurrentYear name. In this case, it is going to find the helper, so everything is going to work as expected. We can now go ahead and save footer.hbs, move into the browser, and give things a refresh. When I refresh the page, we still get copyright 2016 right here. And if I go to the About page, everything looks great. And we can prove that that data is coming back from our helper by simply returning something else. I'm going to go ahead and comment out that code. And before the comment, I'm going to return test just like this. I can now save server.js, refresh the browser, and we get test showing up right here. So the data that renders right after the copyright word is indeed coming from that helper. Now I'm going to go ahead and remove the code so we return the proper year. Now our helpers, they can also take arguments, and this is really useful stuff. Let's go ahead and create a second helper that's going to be a capitalization helper. We'll call the helper Screamit, and its job is going to be to take some text, and it's going to return that text in uppercase. In order to do this, we will be calling hbs.register_helper again. This helper, as I mentioned, will be called Screamit. And it is going to take a function because we do need to run some code in order to do anything useful. Now, Screamit is going to take the text to scream. And all it's going to do is call on that string the toUpperCase method. I'm going to return text.toUpperCase just like this. Now we can actually go ahead and use Screamit in one of our files. I'm going to move into home.hbs. Right here we have our welcome message. I'm going to remove it and we're going to scream the welcome message. In order to pass data into one of our helpers, we first have to reference the helper by name, Screamit. Then after a space, we can specify whatever data we want to pass in as arguments. In this case, we're going to pass in the welcome message, but we could also pass in two arguments by typing a space and passing in some other variable, which we don't have access to. For now, we're going to go ahead and use it like this, which means we're calling the Screamit helper, passing in one argument, welcome message. Now I can go ahead and save home.hbs, move back into the browser, go to the home page, and right here we get welcome to my website in all uppercase. And this is fantastic. Using Handlebars helpers, we can create both functions that don't take arguments and functions that do take arguments. So when you need to do something to the data inside of your web page, you can do that with JavaScript. Now that we have this in place, we are done. We've learned a little bit about Handlebars partials, which let us create reusable chunks of code like headers and footers. And we also learned about Handlebars helpers, which is a way to run some JavaScript code from inside of your Handlebars templates. Both are really useful, super great features when you're using Handlebars. That is it for our little two-part series on Handlebars. In the next video, we're going to move back to talking about Express and how it can customize our requests, our responses, and our server. Stay tuned. I will see you then.